Hello and welcome to the next level of Class Review 2019. As per usual, we don't go in any particular order, and today we're going to be talking about Phantom. Now, I'd like to give you a brief history on Phantom, but hey, it's the baby, so there's nothing to go on. There wasn't even a previous Phantom class in any other iterations of Phantasy Star anything, whether it's on loan or the traditional number titles. Also, am I the only one who wants a bit of a remake for some of the numbered titles? I can't be the only one, but I digress. The weapons utilized by the Phantom class are rifle, katana, and rod, which it seems to want to pretend is a scythe, even though damn near all of the rods in the game, besides being a magical weapon, do not even remotely come close to resembling anything in relation to a scythe. We're going to start off with katana first, but something I feel that needs to be noted is that the entire class has a very special shift mechanic. Unlike Hero, which you hold down the command button for a special attack and it'll switch to a designated weapon, I guess would be the best term. In the case of the katana and the rifle and rod, you get what's known as shift arts, or that's my name for them. Basically what happens is if you press the shift button, your special attack differentiates itself from its original version. So instead of, for example, having one photon art mapped to a hotkey or shortcut, you'll actually have two every single time it gets mapped for every single attack on this class. So that means that the 6 katana attacks you thought you had is actually 12. The katana's special attacks are absolutely nothing like the ones on the Braver. Whereas Braver heavily favors, I want to say, samurai, Mitsurugi, if you know that character, style, generic cliche techniques. The, well, I don't know how to describe it other than the mix of parkour katana slashing style of the Phantom is very aerodynamic and acrobatic. And again, that is not paraphrasing in the slightest. The katana itself has, I want to say, a lot of maneuverability options that you wouldn't expect to be on that weapon, especially given its close range, with the majority of them either moving you in air or homing into your enemy or helping you dodge or escape an enemy while you're attacking them. I don't know who came up with this stuff, but hey, they did a good job and earned their pay that day. However, those same pros can somewhat be viewed as the cons, which I'm going to get into now. When you start off with Phantom, the learning curve for most of the weapons is practically non-existent. However, when you get into the shift attacks, it's a whole nother mess of stuff. In the case of katana, you're going to notice a lot. You're fighting a character or you're trying to do what might be your most powerful move or strong move, and unfortunately it makes your character veer off to the left, veer off to the right, circle around the character, and the camera starts rotating in that weird motion sicknessy way, or you hit them and then the character pulls their katana backwards and somehow your whole body slides back. Yeah, it's weird. Now, one of the special and unique functions of the katana is also, I'd like to say, unfortunately, one of its biggest cons, a little technique by the name of quick cut. Quick cut can happen after any technique you do. However, even though there is no charging animation you have to wait through to access this move, there is an idle animation you have to wait through. Once you do an attack in any way, shape, or form, even specials, your character will sheath its katana and a special light emblem, sign, I'm not sure what you would call it, as well as a sound will trigger, and if you hear it, you press the shift button and your character will do their shift held action independently, but it'll teleport to try to get, right up into the enemy's face. This particular move is meant to be the way the katana can guarantee it does its detonation special. Detonation special is something I'll get into later, but you will hear it coming up every so often. But it's exactly what you think it is, putting a bomb on someone and making it go boom. The current issue with quick cut is that you can't shorten how long it takes to get to the quick cut, which is kind of what makes the name paradoxical, oxymoronic, however you want to look at it. Because the action itself, once initiated, can happen in less than 3 frames. However, the entire process, and this is from me messing around with the timing, no matter what weapon you're on, is only triggered once all animations are done and you're resetting. That's about 7 seconds. Now imagine trying to do that in a high energy area on a boss that can teleport or hit you and your friends from anywhere on the screen. It's not realistic to make it work that way. Most people I've met who utilize the quick cut do it in its normal fashion, which is just holding down the shift button and making the bomb tags detonate that way. They call them markers, but marker doesn't denote explosive, so I say bomb tags just in case anyone's wondering. Next up, let's get into the rifle. Everyone's favorite mode of travel. The rifle's pro, or one of my favorite things about it at least, is the fact that one of its shift actions allows your character to basically run and jump at almost double or triple the normal running speed of your character in game, thereby making it one of the easiest and also most efficient ways for you to travel. Obviously, this is meant to be a technique, so the minute you let go of that run button, you will shoot two big, bulky Hadouken looking blasts that can pierce through enemies. However, the time it stays on screen is, I believe, under 10 seconds, so please do not expect this technique to go that far. Irregularities with weapons continuing. This thing also has invisible drones that are shaped like diamonds and sometimes triangles that can shoot out energy bullets at your beck and call. In fact, I believe there's about 3 or 4 different shift photon arts that allow you to hit the enemy without you actually pressing the normal attack button or manually controlling and steering that photon art. This class can literally pull out a droid that homes in place, stationary, unbreakable, unblockable, that hits an enemy up to 7 times, as well as do tags simultaneously and make reticles that once you release, let other drones float around the enemy and teleport in and out, hitting them 3 times a piece. I think the max you can have out is 4. On top of having another drone come out and smashing it into the ground with your foot, creating a bomb effect. So for the next 10 to 15 seconds, all enemies who step in that area will take damage. And again, that is without you doing any type of attacks directly coming from the rifle. If memory serves, you throw out those drones with the opposite hand that's holding the rifle. And that's not even counting your laser curtain, or row of lasers that you can use on the ground and in the air that do exactly what they sound like, creating piercing damage and hitting anything that even steps in anywhere near it. What a beautiful time it is when you can use a rifle and kill everything without actually pulling the trigger. Now, I know there's a good chunk of people who may think, how is that a pro of the class if it's basically teaching you or training you to be lazy when you utilize it? Well, first and foremost, laziness is a concept. Anything can be used in a lazy way as far as I look at it. But as I mentioned before, you still have the rifle and the rifle's techniques that come directly from the weapon. So everything I mentioned that you can trigger can also be done or utilized while you're shooting and doing traditional special attacks through your rifle. So it's nothing but a win-win in my book. And the final pro of the rifle also being the fact of how easy it's made to access your detonation abilities, or your marker bomb abilities, if you will. When you have those techniques out, they also increase your chances of generating all those bomb tags. Unfortunately, it's not really disclaimed correctly, but a lot of us seem to believe, since it's not weapon hit count based, that your damage amount determines how many of those markers or how big your marker detonation gets before you detonate it. But again, I still have yet to see anything concrete that knows the exact equation on what triggers them showing up on your characters. But it suffice to say, if you want to get your detonation marker really big, mixing and matching everything on the entire palette for rifle as a Phantom, it'll get you there real quick. As far as cons go on the rifle, there's not many. I think there's truly only one. The natural shooting animation of the normal attack is inordinately slow because your character, unfortunately, has to make it look extremely stylish to the point where it almost feels like it's almost too flashy. And if you think I'm joking, when you get to your final shot, your character spins an assault rifle around their finger, then points, aims, and shoots it. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't add anything. It looks more dynamic and dramatic, but that also makes it naturally shoot slower than almost every other long-range weapon in the game. And I've timed it. Also, I looked up the frame data. It's actually one of the slowest normal attack situations in the entire game. Obviously, I'm excluding Hunter because Hunter just recently got a speed boost, but yeah, that attack animation situation is slow as hell. But other than that, yeah, there's really not much of a downside to this weapon. It's got great maneuverability, especially due to the running. However, there's also a continuous fire attack, and you can use it omnidirectionally, and it keeps you stationary in the air. No slow fall, nothing. So I've got nothing but praise for it, honestly. No joke. The cons are very few and far between, and if you talk to anybody who's a Phantom, they'll tell you make sure you always have a good rifle. And of course, last is the rod, which somehow the game has decided we need to call it a scythe when we change classes. Look, you already know how I feel about magic. However, that does not mean I am incapable of making an unbiased opinion. So let me be the first to tell you, it's nice to see a hybrid weapon being used hybridly and to more effect. Generally speaking, I looked at the rod as if it was going to be similar to the Tekker, but no, they blew that out of the water. The rod, for as far as pros go, in the case of the Phantom, utilizes the physical damage on the photon arts, even when they're doing the shift actions. So all of your photon arts, with the exception of one that is only triggered by you unleashing a magic spell through the scythe, only use physical striking damage on and from that weapon. However, and this is when we get into the cons, people, it's a magic weapon by nature. So the physical attack damage you're naturally going to do is not going to be that good by comparison with the rifle and the katana, because the game inherently knows that a rod is really meant for magic. And to this day, no matter what rank or class the weapon is, we have yet to get anything from Sega where a rod, aka scythe, has more physical, aka striking damage than technique or magical damage boost. And I'm pretty sure it's going to stay that way knowing Sega. The Sega giveth and the Sega taketh away, as they say. Most of the photon arts on this particular weapon are very, very wide range hitting, or they're meant to hit something that's at a distance, with the exception of one technique, which is, well, pretty much meant to make you pretend that the weapon is shooting out talismans and then cast a magic spell from afar. Now, that's a very unique situation because, with the exception of two other physical weapons, almost nothing in the game hits in that wide radius of an arc or does damage in that wide of a radius continuously, especially with the way the photons are. But, you can't really mix those two classes, as we all know. So you're on your own. I really do recommend this weapon for those who prefer magic, and I would say think of the photon arch as something you do in that emergency situation when enemies have gotten too close. Now, as if it wasn't implied with my small description on the difference between rod and scythe, the biggest con I can think of is the fact that its magical potential and its physical potential are not anywhere near even or close to each other. It doesn't take much effort to look into the game to know that every single rod, aka scythe, in the entire spectrum of this game, no matter where you're at, will never do or be made to do the same or equal damage unless you force it. As in, you spend a lot of time affixing it. But you would really have to love the rod. Now, the second con is a little bit more debatable, but the natural swing and striking speed of the rod with its regular techniques and its photon arts is very, very normal paced. Almost none of them seem to have a true sense of urgency, and they're not dramatically drawn out like with your normal rifle animation attacks, but they have a long startup, or longer than usual, and they have a long ending. And the final con I can think of, well, I won't say it's bad at doing detonations, because if you stop and think about it, your magic technique is probably going to determine how good or terrible you are with detonations when you're using the rod. And to say that I sat down here and I literally used every single magic technique in this game that can do damage to figure out how long it would take to manifest the maximum amount of detonation tags, I'm not going to lie to you like that. In fact, last I heard and been able to find from the internet, PSO world, and Reddit and Facebook, no one's actually sat down and done that either. So, hey, for all we know, there could be one nice little charge of spell that can get your detonations almost 50%. But the issue I have with it, primarily, outside of it's almost impossible to figure out what's the best way to max out your detonation because of the magic, is the fact that you do a special type of attack while you're casting that. See, the game wants you to always utilize the magic and the strike at the same time, or at least make you think of them. So when you do any magic spell with the rod, your character does a very generic hook and pull backwards attack with a wide sweeping area of attack. However, that area of attack is not dictated by the actual magic spell. So if I use a lightning spell and I hit an aerial enemy that's, say, I don't know, half the field away from me on screen, it's not going to reach. So every time you're doing that spell and it's not up close, you're losing potential damage. I don't like that. There's nothing else in the game that is like that. It's the only thing, and it just feels awkward and weird for me. And on a side note, as far as this detonation special technique, it's very, very wide hitting, and I kind of wish it wasn't, because it looks like it was meant to tag or hurt multiple people, but as many people can tell you in the game, at some point in time, Sega decided really early, a detonation tag can only be on one enemy in one place at a time. So there have been numerous situations where I tagged one enemy and I want to hit one enemy, but because somebody was a little bit closer, the tag jumped over around and switched and popped them. Now this is like early day one stuff. I'm pretty sure they fixed it, but my biggest problem with that detonation technique is that It's very, very close range. Yes, it's a wide arc, but it's unnecessary. And you can't really move that far with it. It does have a bit of a projectile-like movement, but it's very, very encumbered and close in. So in many ways, even though it's a longer weapon, the way it handles doing a detonation attack is the worst out of all three. The rifle can shoot, and as long as it hits it, it's going to go off. The katana has a teleport functionality, but even if it didn't, you got the katana, you're already going to be up close. With the rod, certain enemies can get enough time to get away from that. Or you can't always necessarily gauge the proper distance, at least when you're starting off. But as always, people, take these weapon pros and cons with a grain of salt. It's not meant to make you think one weapon is superior to the other, except in certain class cases like with Gunner. I'm pretty sure if you put your maximum effort and heart into it, you can get any version of these weapons to be extremely OP. All right, now let's get into the class pros and cons. Holy crap, where to begin? Is there even anything bad about this class? Not much. As far as pros go, and this will come up in our next segment, skill tree is easy to build. And I mean, I don't want to say idiot proof because I know what that implies, but let me say this. If you screwed up your skill tree, it was probably an accident or you just didn't invest enough points. The Phantom skill tree is almost like a parent who truly does not favor any child over the other. Everything on the skill tree can help almost every weapon you have in your list. Are there attack boosters? Yeah. They're all equal in power and strength. And on top of the somewhat advantageous magic situation you can set up if you choose to primarily not use Phantom, but make it a subclass due to its, well, I don't know the exact name for it, but I'll call it charge and cast time reduction ability. Keep in mind, it also reduces your natural T attack output damage when you do that. This class is pretty much meant to be the best possible backup, aka subclass you can have in game, as far as you as an individual player. Because not only does it activate your ability to use magic, if you max out all the stats as far as stat buffs go, which can be done well before you hit the max level with the class, it'll actually give you better stat boosts naturally, natively, not factoring in, passive skills, than every other class in the game, plus magic. However, we all know how this works. It's a video game. Hey, they can patch things overnight for all I care. By the time I'm rendering this video, they could announce in the next patch they're going to debuff some of the stat buffs that you gain from having a Phantom as a sub. The weapons are all fun and unique to use. It's really, really interesting and fun making sure that your weapon palette pretty much doesn't really require that much effort as far as variety goes, because you got 2 photon arts right there every time you put one on. So your hand is doing less movements. Your detonation ability and proc rate is partially based on how you build out your skill tree and also you as a player. Because like I said, we're not sure what the exact amount that is required of it, or if it's a hit count situation, because every weapon and every photon art affects it differently. But if you go down that detonation tree, you will not regret it. I've seen plenty of situations where somebody, they're barely at the level requirement, they have underpowered equipment, but they get off a detonation and their damage is almost 5 times what they were doing the whole match. Now imagine if somebody with some stupid good stats did that. We're not even sure the stat that's used to figure out how much damage it's supposed to do and then modification increase. There's really not a lot about it. All you know is it does some good damage. Not to mention, as I mentioned earlier, as long as you're hitting your enemy, your odds of taking the attack power away from your enemy, I believe the most you can get is 15 to 20% or maybe 10 to 15% attack power decrease with the gelling effect built into every single thing you do that's specced out on your tree. It's just fun. And it somewhat even makes up for the lack of defensive abilities or options that's on your skill tree naturally, or that the class has in general. Alright, next up is some cons, and I pretty much just gave it away. Yeah, there's pretty much nothing in the way of defense for this class. Also, you have no form of a blocking technique. You do have about, I want to say, 2 attacks per weapon that have a super armor effect, but a super armor effect is never the same as a genuine block. And there is no defense boosters, as I mentioned previously, in the skill tree. Well, I'm talking about skill tree so much earlier, it's almost going to be nothing to talk about when I get to skill tree. If you spec it for magic, you will have to deal with the reduction as a primary class. However, at that point in time, it's pretty much implied that if you do max out that I'm going to hit you faster, but I'm going to reduce damage situation, that you're only going to use Phantom as a subclass primarily. But the fact that they went out of their way to try to make this class look like a parent that doesn't play favorites between its babies, aka the weapons, I'm happy with that. That's a rarity. If you look at the Braver tree, for example, you basically have to live and die by the katana if you want to go that route, because a lot of people automatically feel like the katana has a naturally higher damage output. But first off, you're supposed to be picking between close range and long range. And sometimes you can find yourself torn. This class, nah, not in the slightest. I specifically went to get everything that was possible for my weapons, minus the rod. And I had plenty of points left over. So I was naturally more comfortable with how I built it out. And I didn't burn up as many skill resets as I normally would in a situation like this. Yes, I struggled a lot with Braver when it first came out. Okay, sue me. A lot of people did. Some of us don't just follow the meta. We just play the game, have fun, and want to make sure we do enough damage to where our friends can see us as valuable. And now the part I've probably spoiled to death at this point. The one and only skill tree of the Phantom. Obviously, I'm not going to go down every single individual thing about the skill tree, and my job is to give you a general description of it because you're new to this game and you're probably not going to know what I'm saying anyway. Well, long story short, the skill tree is not idiot proof, but they got really close, as I've mentioned numerous times at this point. Now, the only thing of mentioned or note that I've probably not talked about is, well, what are the passives on this class as far as the skill tree goes and what you can initiate? Basically nothing. The only one I can truly think of that's even worth mentioning or even does anything truly effective, one ability called Full Dive or Full Drive, correct me if I'm wrong, Bullseye, and of course, Gespensed. Now, Gespensed you probably won't have to think too much about because it's one of the few abilities locked behind a high level cap wall, but it reduces damage taken when you're at 50% or lower HP. So basically, it's trying to make sure you don't die, and it nullifies your ability to even get a status effect. I don't think there's anything else in the game that makes you immune, which is, I don't know how to describe it, it's just not perfect, but close to it. And of course, the other things are more stat enhancement based, which is why, you can't really screw it up because there's no true speciality. Of course, you can upgrade your detonation abilities, your ability to slow down, to weaken the enemy with gelling. And of course, there are some things that are natural, like photon related stuff, HP related stuff. Actually, no, I take that back. There are no HP related things, but most of your photon points, because that's primarily what can help the Phantom do excessive damage. Now here's something really cool though. Almost every single thing on the Phantom's list maxes out at 5 skill point investment. I know I counted it. I think it's about 13 last I counted. 13 items have a 5 max boost. So believe me when I tell you it's pretty good and pretty easy to do big damage. Damn good damage. Pun intended, I regret nothing. I digress. Now as far as the markers go, yes, they exist. Yes, there are things that can help you boost your accumulation of those detonation bomb thingy-majigs, which really wish they hadn't called them markers. However, there are some things you can do in relation to those, such as marker heal and marker drain. I really don't like saying PP drain because, I don't know, R. Kelly? But PP drain, for example, recovers PP when you've accumulated the maximum amount of markers. The max being about 20 photon points, and there's also a heal version of it too. Obviously capping out at 20% and recover HP when the maximum amount of markers are placed. So the game even rewards you for favoring using your markers as a finisher over a traditional photon art. And to be fair, not really too many things wrong with that. Now, your very unusual built-in charging mechanic, which makes you invisible, also can increase your movement speed. Well, first off, I know people think that's really good, but when you're not in combat, it just feels weird to walk around with a charged up technique, not hitting anybody with it, and just using it to run around. And unlike Hero, for example, you can't store it, or at least to my knowledge, you can't store it. I already told you guys numerous times, I don't do a lot with the magic, folks. And that being said, that don't mean they ain't got some good stuff for them. As I've mentioned numerous times, you can, in fact, decrease your damage, but also increase the speed of how long it takes you to charge stuff. So imagine the strongest possible magic spell in your arsenal being reduced by 20% or more before you can cast it. Doesn't that just sound beautiful to you? Also, there's also an increase for that one too. It's called ambivalence. Now, while you're using a rod, it increases your marker accumulation rate, but why I also like it, it increases your gear too while using techniques. So, versatility can never be something that's understated with the Phantom class. Bullseye is kind of the same way, and Quick Cut is also the same way too. That being said, I'm a little bit on the fence about gelling. Yes, it does reduce, and it's built into your class, but even if you max out the gelling stuff, if I'm counting right, since it goes up to 5% increase for your gelling proclamation rate, and with your gelling redress, it strengthens gelling when you attack an enemy afflicted with gelling already. Unless you're in a group that's got at least 2 phantoms, you're not really going to notice a lot. Also, most people aren't trying to get hit. However, I feel like this was their attempt at reducing damage when you don't have any defensive options on your class tree. So we can call that the one true absolute con of the whole entire situation with Phantom. There's nothing on your tree that's meant for defense. Absolutely nothing. I know, because I paused this video and I'm looking at it right now. Furthermore, when it comes to your dodging ability, which much like the hero, and I think all advanced class might have this, you gain a secondary special attack. It's way better than heroes as far as homing and being able to target, because it sends out about 4 or 5 special detonation drones that come out of your character's side from some invisible specter that we can't see and goes into your enemy or tries to home in on them. Even if it misses, it can loop around, which I think is 10 times better than the hero's counter actions, because even though they're good, there's always that chance an enemy can get away with them with a specially timed or specifically timed whatever you want to. Or you can activate it, but the enemy did it with the long range technique and you're unable to hit them. Phantom ain't got that problem, ladies and gentlemen. Doesn't matter how far you're on the screen, as long as you are targeting them. If they try to hit you with something, you dodge it and you activate that move, it's universal for all 3 weapons. Those little balls of doom and boom will go and target them. And of course, yes, you can enhance it on your skill tree. In fact, dodge counter shot increases the damage those balls do by 115% max, so 15% really. And there's even a PP gain for good dodging too, but I really wouldn't recommend that. It's not that, you're going to have a hard time regaining photon points, but the effectiveness of it is rare. Because think about how many times you attack versus how many times you dodge in game. You're always going to hit more times than you dodge. Now we can get into who should play this class, aka the part you really care about. Okay, so if you've utilized any close range styles like Hunter or Fighter, and yes, the hybrid Braver, or if you specifically like something like Braver and Braver for the bow and the katana, or you are actually experimented with some of the upper echelon or mixed classes like Tekker, for example, I think you're going to fit in. So in no set term, everybody's skill level increases or decreases at whatever rate they do. I would say a intermediate level player can fall in love with Phantom immediately. A new player is going to be annoyed and confused why he's moving around so much on the screen with his katana, as well as perplexed by how to even activate or properly gauge the effectiveness of gelling and the detonation markers. So it's not for babies, but it's not so criminally advanced that it will take you a millennium. If you know you love the concept of Phantom and how it handles, but you have some prerequisites as far as a certain type of weapon class, they probably got you covered with the katana or the rifle or the rod. If anything, the biggest issue might be which is your secondary weapon that you're going to primarily use after your primary that you started with. Because when you go into this class, you've been playing the game for some time at this point. So you've probably got a katana already that you love or is near cap, or a rifle or rod. And you got to figure out which of the other two you're going to value the most. Are you finally going to dip your toe into magic, or you're going to try to be long ranger because it's easier for you to manage it versus technique related things? So time wise, I would say after you've got a good 2 to 3 months in the game, you can get into Phantom and you're not going to regret it. Or alternatively, for beginners, you could make Phantom your subclass once you've unlocked it, of course, and you will see the stat boost gain over time and it'll be dramatic. So, to summarize, I guess, if you've already maxed out at least one class, or if you've gotten into the mixed classes like Tekker or Braver, maybe Bouncer, you're going to feel right at home utilizing Phantom. Your only true learning curve is going to be understanding your special techniques and the fact that your regular special moves are all built into more than one photon art. But yeah, I can't see you not having fun, especially with a skill tree that's damn near idiot proof. Now, as far as skill ring options, holy crap. I'm going to be blunt. Unless it's a class specific skill ring, Phantom benefits from the utilization of pretty much all skill rings that are general purpose, as well as some that are class specific, but not photon art specific. Don't get them mixed up. There's a difference between a ring that modifies your special attack versus modifies your class. As you all know, I love utilizing the critical rings, but you can only put on one at a time. So, for instance, if you're a Phantom but you heavily use the rifle more than anything, you already know I'm going to tell you to get a range crit boost ring. Not because it boosts up your critical proclamation, but because it does that, as well as increases your critical damage to complement some things on your skill tree in relation to your photon points, boosting up your critical odds. Also, that's to say nothing of the effort rings that have been out for every single class and what that does for you, and also the built-in damage reduction that comes with those rings. Now, as far as your left ring, I would recommend, just because it's obviously low on the defense, or rather the defense modifications and boost, Party of Toughness being one of your primaries. Now, primary toughness, I don't think we've talked about it much, but it basically gives you a defense or damage reduction based on the amount of people in your party and the level of the ring. Also, keep in mind, technically you can wear 5 rings. Remember, your armor, or units as they call them, can be merged with rings that you've made and leveled up and crafted. So, if you wanted, you could have 3 sets of Party of Toughness plus 1 on your hand. So that means you could get something like, I believe, a maximum 9 or 12% boost on your damage reduction, which would actually be some of the best in the whole game, because Party of Toughness reduces all forms of damage, not just striking or ranged or magical damage. Now, as far as a go-to right ring, like I said, it's always either going to be a crit ring for me, or it's going to be the effort ring. However, some of the smarter things or more common things can also work for you too, depending on how enveloped you are in rings. For instance, everyone and their mom knows that it takes a little too long to utilize some of your healing items. So, Moon Atomizer Lover, or Atomizer Lover, Mate Lover, which that name's still hilarious to me. So many puns. You can fuse into your armor when they're maxed out, which can reduce how long it takes you to utilize items, healing items, or revival items. I can't recommend those enough. At a bare minimum, if you're not going to do a moon speed increase, I can honestly recommend you one of the best left rings to put inside of your armor is Mate Lover, just due to the fact that it's universal for all forms of mate. Monomate, Dimate, Trimate, the healing trifecta, it reduces how long it takes to utilize all of them. So in some cases, and I've seen people do it, if you've mixed a Mate Lover ring with a Mate Lover infusion, both of them maxed out on one piece of armor, one person I know jumped in the air and he healed with a Monomate, I think like 3 times before he hit the ground or close to it. That being said, I think you can't heal in the air anymore. That might have been a long time ago. Like first year introduction to rings. So more than likely though, you can still tap out a lot of Monomate drains, and it was a beautiful sight. Because that automatically means that if he has a big technique coming in, unlike everybody else who's stuck in an animation and has to be hit by it when a boss shows up, he can usually do it, block, or either have enough time to dodge it completely. He's one of the main reasons why I made sure I always have a Mate Lover's ring infused into my armor. Now for our final area, the high synergy class mixes. First off, who don't got high synergy class? As we all know with the advanced classes, but I guess it bears repeating because I don't know if this is your first time viewing this or not, and any of the other videos, all the advanced classes cannot be put as a, cannot have a sub. Phantom is unique, but because it can be a subclass, but Phantom by itself cannot have a sub. So when we talk about synergy, we're really only talking about how does Phantom function as a subclass. And as I mentioned multiple times, its base stat sheet outclasses, no pun intended, every single other classes. However, those other classes have passive related skills that can affect things dramatically. So even though on paper, for example, something like Phantom will give you more stat boost than Hunter, Hunter has Fury and other skill tree related stuff that can boost up your damage, and it doesn't give you a direct calculable number. So it may in fact end up doing more damage or increasing your critical rate or critical rate and critical damage simultaneously. But I can tell you from the get-go, all magic classes, all of them love Phantom because it gives them something that they've never had before, except for Tekker: defense. And I don't just mean defense in magic, I mean universal defense boost. Now, as far as the physical classes like Fighter, Hunter, Braver, that kind of situation, it's pretty much identical. In fact, there are some people who they have certain weapons or equipment that even when they're at near the cap level, they can't utilize unless Phantom is at the top, or they have to completely respec another class's stat tree to be able to utilize certain equipment based on their requirements. Even though we forget about it, now that we're getting up in those levels, it's more noticeable when you need to respec a mag or respec your class stat boost when you get an item at endgame that you can't utilize. Theoretically, it almost shouldn't be possible, But hey, some things happen. Some people just don't utilize the skill reset, or sometimes a new player hasn't been in an era where skill resets were raining down like candy, so they don't know that, oh man, I really messed this up, let me go back in. But basically, Phantom is a good subclass for everyone. If you're a Rangers type, you get the added striking and magical defenses, and they will benefit you, as well as obviously the range, damage, natural attack stat increase. When it comes to the Hunters, second verse same as the first. You get that range and you get that technique defense, which you crave. However, since you can also block, your reduction is even better. And remember, even though it's nerfed, you can also utilize every single form of magic with the exception of the hybrid magic skills that have to be built up via meter. So on some level, you benefit more than others. Braver, for example, I say Braver gets the best benefit out of it, but some of the best damage you can get with that class hybrid mix like that have only been in supporters with Tekker and Phantom, as Phoenix Hat will tell you. I'm probably going to add that item description or class description guide for Phantom as a sub with Tekker as the main down in the section on the bottom. So, if you're curious about what that looked like from a previous video but you didn't watch it, I'm going to drop it down here for you too. With that being said, I'm going to start getting other people on here to do these same questions and see what their opinion is. People who've been playing Phantom as long as me, or they went down a different weapon path because, hey, y'all already know I'm not the magic guy. And yeah, I'm going to add them in and, edit out any long pauses or anything like that so everyone sounds more streamlined. I'm trying to keep this under an hour. First up, from my fellow guild of the Fragons is Monochromatic, who writes in about everything from questions 2 to 6. As a main assault rifle user, it does pretty much have long range and it behaves very much like a sniper rifle in terms of just attacks. One bullet is, as I've said, a big powerhouse. Its damage is ridiculous, especially if just attacks are timed well enough. Critical hits may reach excess of, at least so far in her whole experience, or she, I don't know, up to 100,000 in damage. Equipment being at plus 35, of course. Affixed with nothing more than 2 used up S abilities that amp up critical and the raw damage, and a few others that do focus on range attack. That said, while it packs the punch, there's a few downsides to it. Here come the cons. Most notably being just attack succession speed, it's extremely slow. Given that Phantom has one or more flashy animations, see, I'm not the only one who thinks so. Them flashy animations slow shit down. Some of the enemies may take advantage of this if you're not careful enough. Timings are key to have steady flow of big damage. Otherwise, it may take longer on higher difficulties, even though you do have much. Still wish she'd have talked about some of the other weapons, but I take what I can get. When it comes to section 3 class pros and cons, he and or she wrote, okay, if there's one thing I noticed, it's that it's easy to take advantage of the invincibility frames in this class. So true. Not as much as Braver though, but so true. Since the animations are almost deliberately fluid and flashy, albeit slower than any other class, casting animation included. Oh shit. Except to be able to dodge either via rifle weapon action or casting any spell or abilities or techniques. This makes it one of the brokenest classes given time if your timing is once again impeccable. This is one of the classes that could really stay up in the air for long, giving you spam just attacks just to stay afloat. This gives you an advantage once you recover if you get hit by a launching attack. However, This doesn't mean that it doesn't have any cons. It gives you a reason to get a drink that boosts photon points in the cam shit. It's a big PP hog. Damn it, that never sounds right. Especially since what you do to prolong most of its photon arts or shift special attack photon arts, whatever which you must chain in order to go up against, will probably any enemy by mid-range. How this problem goes is like this. To give an example, we use the photon art Notch Tongue Griff. No, I don't know if that's the proper way to say it. Don't quote me. For an example, by normal photon art stuff, you'd just be shooting out a bit that goes forward. The longer you press, the further it goes. As far as locking it, still possible. The drain on this photon art normally isn't that bad. Now, if you do shift photon art, just do weapon action before casting the one you want. Not only do you have a big chunk taken off as if you're casting normal photon art, but also while running, the photon points get drained. Okay, not sure I get that last part. Alright, when asked about the skill tree, as far as my concern goes, this is very typical of a successful photon art tree. Whereas you already have the freedoms to use your points to main weapon bonuses and such, with seemingly the others at a low priority. After all, you're not able to have a subclass if you're using the successor class, though it still gives you the choice whether to focus on weapon or not. Personally, I do have mine set to be biased towards rifles, on top of having Lord of Thorn only one level, something that boosts the damage upon mark detonation at the expense of lesser chances to make it appear. Plus, some long range mark boosts to further have more chances to do such. High phantom bonuses once you reach 80 really don't have much of an effect, which is kind of odd. But what's cool is its other skill that's locked up until a certain level, Gaspensed. Gaspensed reduces taken damage if you're on a certain HP level. Think of it as a shield of sort, although it's best not to rely on it that much on certain circumstances. Enemies will and still kill you despite such. Curse of having a type advantage, or disadvantage I should say. Otherwise, and in overall, the skill tree is kind of meh, or average. Bland, if you will, as its finest at its finest. At least even if the skill tree is very reminiscent of Hero's gear generation bonuses, a bunch of weapon bonuses, mark boosts, and phantom time, the kind of work like either gunners or heroes if you stop and think about it, there isn't much of a room to experiment with other than Lord of Thorn levels. Recommend up to level 3 by the way, otherwise you won't have any more chances to place a mark at all if you're going higher than that. Okay, interesting. Now let's see who's next to get an opinion from. Next up is a name that I can't properly say because it's terribly written. AOU, 2 V's and an I. I'm sure she's a nice, sane person, or at least she likes to think of herself that way. Her approach to things, let me see, where's a good place to start? Phantom is a class made for the new type of player, the kind that just wants to pick up and play and not have to figure much out. Unlike Hero, or much like Hero, its advanced class or successor class, I forget why they are calling it now, with simplified skills and skill trees and utilizing existing weapons, which muddy the pool of existing weapons. Yeah, I guess you could say that. The katana is great offensively, but it's not as good as the other twos for most situations. If you're using all 3 weapons, you'd want to use it on bosses. You don't have to chase around a lot. It offers explosive damage when it can be used, but it has some weird attack angles that you have to get used to. It's like I told everybody, there's an unusual learning curve with this iteration of the katana. Rifle is good. It's the safest one of them all. It can be somewhat difficult to regain your photon points back, but has great area of effect and great single target attacks. So true. The rod, on the other hand, can be weird at times. You play it like a melee force and weave in and out of melee range. You have great all-range attacks, and don't let anyone tell you that the photon arts are bad, except for Eisenflügel. Again, not sure if I said that right. That photon art is useless, but you should use the others as they all have uses. The class's pros is that it's good at everything. It has no real con. See, I'm not the only one that thinks so. Its only con is that it's not as good defensively as a hunter. Fair enough. It's not a complicated class either. It seems dauntingly complicated at first, but easy when you get used to it. The skill tree is simple. It's idiot proof, so basically you should get everything except for Lord of Thorn, Mark Photon Point Drain, and Mark Heal, depending on your skills. Photon Point High Up is optional. Yes, that's a weird name. Photon Point High Up. Worth it to get to 200 maximum photon points though, for the benefits of Photon Stream though. If you get Quick Cut and Bullseye from your list, or Ambivalence depending on whether Depending on the weapons you plan on or are using from the skill tree, only put 3 points max on Lord of Thorn if you plan on using it, or have a weapon that specifically benefits it. Anything higher actually hinders your damage normally. So true. Max Chase Marks boosts as it benefits your damage per second, and you want the affixes SAF phrase DK to go along with it for 5% extra damage to stuff affected by gelling. 1 point in gelling redress and 3 points in phantom time gel. Damn, she gave a whole skill tree recipe. It's advised that you should make both zero shot mark boosts and long range mark boosts maximized, unless you play katana only. Then you can put points only in zero range mark boosts. If you use rifle or rod, it's advised that you put points into both no matter what. Every other skill should be maxed though. It's not too hard based on how little's on that skill tree too. Now as far as section 5, if you're the kind of player who wants to top charts after the gunner nerf and have a class that does the best in 99% of situations, this class, just like Hero, is for you. It's surprising this class is even more broken than Hero mechanically, then there is no reason not to use it. At least this class has depth to it and feels complete. Or if you want to relax, not worry about much, or watch TV while you play main rifle. I would just like to point out that is an opinion. I am not condoning being lazy just because the game made a certain weapon usage easy, but that is a hilarious thought. Also, that's how you get ADD, folks. As far as the rings go, for left rings you could use Tech Charge Parry, Jumping Dodge, and Party of Toughness. See, got another Party of Toughness users. Alright. It's advised that you use the Crit Strike for your right ring. But if you're into swapping rings out, you can also use PP Convert, HP Restore It, Heal Share, or an Effort Ring. And as far as classes she feels like have good synergy composition with Phantom, well, she basically said everything under the sun. Force Phantom, Braver Phantom, Techer Phantom, Bouncer Phantom, and Summoner Phantom. Hey, why'd she leave out all the close range classes? So yeah, those are the opinions of the community in PSO2 Server 2 on Phantom. Alright, that's the end of this video. As always, you know I'm always looking for talent and critiques, and shout outs to everyone whose characters are in my video who helped me get the footage. All of us can be found on Server 2. Names will be in the descriptions. Feel free to look us up. We're pretty friendly. Except AOUVVI. I don't know about that one.